Is Matt McLain truly healthy and ready to go for 2025? Well, we're going to tell you if he's healthy, when and where he may play for the Reds. We've got that for you on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have been podcasting about this team for a combined 12, going on 14 years. We've been talking a lot about the Cincinnati Reds, and we are excited that you're with us here today because we are literally talking Reds every single day all throughout the offseason, getting you ready for what is sure to be an awesome 2025 season here on the Locked On Reds podcast that is brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And on today's podcast, glad that you're alongside us because coming up later on, we're going to finish our scouting conversation with Red Scout Tyler Gibbons as we look at the 20 to 80 scouting scale and try to make some sort of sense of it. We're also here in a few minutes want to talk about a player that the Cincinnati Reds have no excuse for not pursuing this offseason. You're not going to want to miss that. But we're going to begin today with Matt McLain on today's episode that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB to save $20 off your first purchase. All right, Steve, we want to start with Matt McLain because it feels as though this team had a Matt McLain-sized hole in it last year that they never really consistently filled. There were times where they didn't fill it at all, and that is why we saw the offense falter. That's why we saw the defense falter. There was just so many different reasons why the Reds needed Matt McLain. So we are closely watching his developments out in the Arizona Fall League. He's been playing in the outfield. He's been playing some. There have been reports of, well, maybe he gets scratched here or there because of health reasons. So what does all of this really culminate into before we get into spring training?
Well, you're right. The Reds did have a Matt McLain-sized hole in their lineup. If you recall, when he came up 2 years ago in Colorado, he was an instant injection of energy into this Reds lineup. He very quickly became the engine of the lineup. And as Matt McLain went, the team went, and they continued to add and call guys up, and the rest is history, and they made a push just missing the postseason. Not having him last year, nobody really stepped up other than Ellie as far as being a guy that could be an engine. And then when Ellie did step up, the rest of the team went cold. So it was quite a problem in 2024. So, now let's start looking towards 2025 because everyone is counting on Matt McLain to be back. And he did an interview with Foul Territory, and they talked about the shoulder, and they talked about whether or not the shoulder was 100%, whether or not it was ready to go. And what Matt McLain told the folks over at Foul Territory was that there's still pain in that shoulder, especially after back-to-back days, that it will come in waves. Some days it'll be fine, some days that it won't. But he also says that's what the doctors prepared him for. He says that his doctors told him that there would basically be days like that and that he was going to have to take a full calendar year of 100% full-time rehab in order for his shoulder to be 100%. And that's the direction that he's going. He did say, Jeff, that even with the pain, the discomfort that he felt, he was ready to go. He was planning on playing last year. And then he got that rib injury. The Reds are calling it a stress injury with all the swings and trying to get himself.
Stress reaction or something like that?
Stress reaction, yeah. So Matt kind of doesn't make that sound like it's any big deal. He just talked about the shoulder. For me, there's some cause for pause if we're going to rhyme today. If there's still pain on back-to-back days, then you can't say he's ready to go. I get that he's moving that direction. I get that you're planning, following the doctor's timeline, a full year puts you towards the end of spring training. So it's reasonable to say that when spring training starts, you're expecting Matt McLain to be there and be involved. So all of those things are reasonable, but to just simply pencil him in right now feels a little premature. It feels a little extra. And if you can't, with 100% certainty, pencil him in, then you need to have a contingency plan. And I don't know what that contingency plan looks like right now.
Yeah, I need to see like a week, 2 weeks, a stretch of games during spring training where he's not scratched, where he's playing every day. And he doesn't need to be hitting the cover off the ball every single day, but not look like he is a shell of himself. Like there's a lot of things that he will have to prove in Goodyear, and we just won't have those answers until he gets there. We're not going to get those answers from the Arizona Fall League. Although they have been talking about, they've been trying to get him at bats as much as can be had. I found it interesting, and you found some good quotes on this, talking about, his inclusion on the Arizona Fall League roster, his playing out there, and I think it gives a little bit more light on him being scratched and maybe missing a game, and why that's not necessarily the biggest deal in the Arizona Fall League. But I think it also leads to our caution with all of this, our cause for pause, which maybe we could ask Santa Claus if he could get, no, I'm just kidding. Other words.
Stop it.
No. But no, I think that when it comes to Matt McLain, we're just not going to feel comfortable about watching him, about having him in this lineup until we see him in this lineup.
Yeah, and now we're also talking about throwing in a potential position change on top of all that as well. And if you are not only going to rely on Matt McLain to be ready to go on opening day and pencil him in, but you're also going to say we're not going to go sign an outfielder because we're going to pencil in Matt McLain. That's a double tragedy as far as I'm concerned. Listen, there's a website out there called sportscasting.com. They're quoting Matt McLain on a couple things. I'm not sure if this was a direct interview or a requote with those folks, but when talking about second base, shortstop, center field, Matt McLain says, I really like infield. I know the impact I make there. And to that regard, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he told me to my face, I'm a shortstop. So, I know his heart.
You didn't even get the question out before he said that.
I know his heart is in the infield. So when asked about a potential move to center field and playing center field out in the Arizona Fall League right now, Matt McLain said, quote, people have kind of taken it and run with it. It's more so to get at bats here out in Goodyear. Everyone has their priority players. We have 2 shortstops and a second baseman that are priority. And I was added the day before the first games. So they asked me, hey, can you play other possessions to get more at bats? And I said, yes. So, we've heard that floating around out there, that it's just a move to get him more at bats and it's not being considered a serious position move. Your good friend and equal energy generator, Gordon Whitmire, said to Nick Kroll, hey, is Matt McLain going to play center field? Nick Kroll's response, it's a wait and see. Nick Kroll then went on to talk about the positional flexibility of Jonathan India, specifically mentioning that India's played at second base, played some third base in his career, worked a little bit in left field, and even played some first base. So super utility Jonathan India from your president of baseball operations, Nick Kroll.
I want to respond to that, but first, equal energy generator. Like, what the heck are you talking about? You comparing me and Gordon? And Gordon is a non bias, maybe even bias against the Reds reporter. And quite frankly, I love the Reds, and I'm more optimistic than most.
So out of everything I just said, that's what you're going to ping on?
Yes, that's what I mean. That's a personal attack on me. What are you doing? I'm comparable energy. I am flabbergasted by that. I don't have enough coffee to drink that away. So, no, but let's go back to the whole position move thing. This is why I never really bought into it. There were a lot of folks that the moment he played center field out in Arizona, they're like, got it, he's a center fielder. Print it. Next year he's going to be on the roster. Center fielder, Matt McLain. No. And I don't buy this, especially when you bring in his quotes about still dealing with shoulder the pain and stuff like that. Like, I just want him to be healthy and play the position that he became comfortable with his first season in the league. We didn't see him at all last year. We're going to take a guy that hasn't played a game in almost 2 years. It's going to be like 560 some days in between Major League Baseball regular season games for Matt McLain. And we're all of a sudden going to move him to a totally different position. I feel like that is a horrible idea. I get it. He has experience out there, but he needs to get healthy first. Let's get him on the field and let's have him play a long time, maybe a whole season, before we start worrying about whether or not second base is his position of the future.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel better opening day 2025 having Matt McLain be your second baseman, which by default then means that Jonathan India is your super utility and is going to get innings in the outfield? Do you feel better about that, or moving Matt McLain to center field and putting Jonathan India at second base?
I feel better about McLain at second base, and I'll tell you why. Risk of re-injury. We talk about this all the time when we talk about Ellie De La Cruz moving to the outfield. Well, you best believe we're going to be talking about Matt McLain's injury risk in the outfield if you're moving him to the outfield. So I would much rather have a healthy and productive Matt McLain in the lineup and deal with whatever fallout of Jonathan India in the outfield ends up being than moving him out there. Maybe he plays good for a week and then he gets hurt again and we don't see him for a while.
All right, this I know, Jeff. If this is the plan, if the plan is an opening day outfield that goes something like Steer, Friedel, India, that's an F grade for the offseason before we ever even see an at bat. But listen, not only do the Reds need outfielders, but there has been continued talk that the Reds need to go and get the pitching. And coming up, we're going to tell you why it might be time for the Reds to go overseas to get it. We've got that coming up next. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets back if you win. That's right. A $5 winning bet's going to get you $150 back in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need all in one place to place live bets on the NFL. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, check out the odds on next year's World Series. The 2025 Reds, well, they're 60-1 odds to win the whole shebang. So maybe throw a few bucks at them, because I think the Reds are going to be better than that. Just saying. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets back if you win your first $5 bet over at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. We're talking Reds baseball here today and every day, every week, every month, all off season long, all spring training, all regular season, and God willing in the 2025 postseason. Make sure you subscribe, click the like button, click the notification bell, subscribe to us on your favorite audio platform. Take us to the gym with you. We will be there for you talking Reds baseball, because we love talking Reds baseball with you. All right, Jeff, we teased this a little bit there at the end of the last segment. Not only do the Reds need an outfielder, but they do need to look at getting some pitching. There is a rumor now that Nick Martinez is going to sign that qualifying offer. Time's going to tell on that, but that helps with the pitching. But in the meantime, they still need to be looking. And for everydayers, you guys know I struggle with names, but these are in my wheelhouse because we get to do a Japanese name today, because Jeff's contention is that the Reds need to be in on Roki Sasaki. And you have some thoughts on this.
All in. And this is a different situation from most postings. The Lot Marines, his team in Japan, are posting him. He's only 23 years old. There is a rule. There's kind of like a statute of limitations when it comes to a Japanese player becoming posted for Major League Baseball teams to sign, that they have to have a certain number of years played in Japan, or at least be 25 years old to get that paper. He's not going to get the money that Yoshinobu Yamamoto signed last year, because everybody's thinking that when they think of a pitcher being posted from Japan. Even Shota Imanaga, all that other stuff. Roki Sasaki is actually too young. when it comes to getting that paper. So they're going to have to post him, and he must sign a minor league contract by any team. It does not matter who it is. And there are rules against, in this case, during the negotiating process, during the recruiting process, as it were, basically for this, they are not, that teams trying to get him are not allowed to discuss long-term contract aspirations. So this is not a situation where the Dodgers can go in, throw down their piles of cash and say, look, we got more than everybody else, come play with us. This is a situation where things are about his likes, what is best for him, his career, and all this other stuff. On top of the minor league contract move, he basically is signed by a team as a rookie. So whoever gets him for 6 years of team control. This actually goes back to when the Angels signed Shohei Ohtani. They signed Ohtani for $2.3 million as the posting fee they sent to his Japanese team, and then he signed for Major League, for a rookie minimum deal. That means that the Reds should be all in on this financially wise. And there's one other reason, Steve, to really get behind this idea. And I'm still looking to see if there's been any contact or any scouting. I would hope that the Reds sent some international scouts to some Roki Sasaki games. But there was a quote, and this came from Jim Ellen, who covers Japanese baseball for a living. He had a quote from someone at the Lot Marines. He just calls them a source. And the quote, when it came to Roki Sasaki, is this: "We prefer he's in a smaller media market with a softer landing after the way he's been tarred and feathered by the Japanese tabloid media for the last 2 years." The source said, adding that the principal concern was finding the place that was in his, quote, best interest for short-term and long-term success. Hello, baby! Who says they're a small market all the time? Come on down to Cincinnati, Roki Sasaki.
So there's a 2-word answer as to why I'm concerned about the Reds even going anywhere near this. And those 2 words are Shogo Akiyama. The Reds have demonstrated that they have a long history of, they'll try something, but if it doesn't work out, they might not ever do it again. We're never going to see another 10-year contract. We may not ever see another posting to a Japanese team. But I hope I'm wrong about that, because all of the reasons you laid out make the Reds a good fit for giving this a try. And, they have one of the more highly respected pitching coaches in that small market that the player seems to be wanting to go to. So, I'm in on this. This is the kind of signing with low risk, high reward. Now, I don't know why.
Very high reward. Yeah.
Everyday baseball fan cares so much about baseball money, because it's not real. It's all fake.
Right.
But, if you're going to pay $2.3 million, say, as a posting fee, that's peanuts in baseball money. They'll give away
that's less than what they would have had to pay to Luke Maile.
Yeah, they'll give away an extra bobblehead, and then the extra ticket sales from that game pay the $2.3 million. Come on. Right. It's not that hard to make up that kind of money in baseball. So I agree with you. I think that the Reds should be in on this, but I don't know that everybody really knows who Sasaki is. So let's talk about him as the player a little bit. We can start off. He's got a heater that can go past 100 miles an hour, which is kind of becoming the new standard. Remember when it was like, can this guy throw 90? Well, now it's, can this guy throw 100? And Sasaki can, in fact, throw 100. And he's got a splitter. Think Fernando Cruz on his best day, better than as a splitter. That is going to be Sasaki's splitter.
And he is regarded by scouts as an ace-level talent. In his time in Japan, he has 394 and 2/3 career innings, 505 strikeouts during that time, only 88 walks, and he has a 2.1 ERA. Those kind of numbers are just ridiculous. And I again mentioned he was only 23 years old. And this is kind of how things kind of separate a little bit for me. And if I could speak to the Reds on this, if you are worried about the whole Shogo Akiyama story replaying itself, it's not going to. Remember the crazy scenarios with which Shogo Akiyama entered Cincinnati. He came over here in COVID, which meant that nothing was right, nothing was normal, and everything was topsy-turvy. So he had to deal with all of that. And then he had the crazy offseason accident where his wife had a tree fall on him in Sharon Woods. This man never had a normal offseason. He never had a normal spring training for the Reds. There were a lot of things that were different about him. Plus, he was older. And what the Reds spent to get Shogo Akiyama here would be more than what they had to spend to get Roki Sasaki here. Because, like we said, $2.3 million for Shohei Ohtani. Let's say inflation rises that, they probably still only have to pay like $3 million posting fee to the Lot Marines. And with all of that being said, you're talking about a kid that is literally the same age as Ellie De La Cruz. Literally in the same, like, point of his career where it's like, yes, he is amazing. He has shown some great stuff. He is only just beginning. So when it comes to Roki Sasaki and what he could bring to this rotation, we're not just talking about depth at this point. They will be paying fifth starter, prove it starter money to a guy who could push Hunter Green to be the ace. And I really feel like this is a dude that they need to be all
easy.
That's what scouts are saying. That's not what I'm saying. Scouts are saying that he could be an ace wherever he goes.
Well, he may also compete with Hunter Green's injury history. Let's talk about that for just a second, because he has dealt with some health issues as well. You know, he has had a torn oblique, sore shoulder. So he's only made 18 starts.
Last season. Yes, last season.
Last season.
And I would point to the fact that this is the same sort of injury history that we're talking about with Matt McLain. So let's not put the word injury prone. Rather,
well, you know, if you're going to throw injury prone, if one is injury prone, they're all injury prone, sir. But no, my point is this: he is coming off of a pretty major sore shoulder season, and just another reason to put him with Derek Johnson. Because Derek Johnson clearly was able to take Hunter Green and his sore shoulder syndrome, try and say that 3 times fast, be able to take that and turn him into an ace. So there's no reason to think he couldn't do it with Sasaki as well. I like exploring this. At the end of the day, is it realistic? It's realistic. At the end of the day, is it something that the Reds could actually do, could pull off? Yes, it is. So it's definitely conversations they should have. Now, we don't know who else is in on this. We don't know who's going to be competing for this. Everybody's immediate knee-jerk reaction is Dodgers, but you know that may not be the best fit for the player. And because this is a free agent situation, the player is going to have a say and going to be able to go where he wants to go. So this is something to definitely keep our eyes on, something to definitely see how it plays out, and it's at least worth talking about. It's at least worth looking at.
Yes, they need to do all they can to get Roki Sasaki. But you know what, Steve? When it comes to scouting, you talk about, you know, scouts say that he is an ace-level talent. Well, there's a scouting scale, and quite frankly, it's intense. We're going to make a little bit of sense of it, though, coming up here in just a few minutes. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to your next event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, and you can also use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to save $20 off your first purchase. And Game Time makes it so easy wherever you're going. If you're going to a basketball event, a football event, if you're going to a theater event, a comedy event, whatever, they're going to show you views from your seat. They're going to show you the all-in price for that ticket, so you don't get any surprise fees, and it's so easy. You buy them, you get them digitally, they're sent right to your phone. Download the Game Time app today. Do like me and Steve. Every time we go down to a Reds game or a Bengals game or wherever we're going, we jump on the Game Time app close to the event starting, and you'll get some great deals there because they've got last-minute deals on most tickets to everything, even including Cincinnati Cyclones tickets. You wouldn't go see some hockey this winter time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off that first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. What is up with the scouting scale going 20 to 80? Like math and normal ratings, and I'm like a 1 to 10 guy, and when it comes to rating things 1 to 10, like 20 to 80. So nothing is ever worse than 20 and nobody's ever better than 80. Like what was kind of the reasoning behind that scouting scale being like that's how we rate people's abilities?
It's a great question. I would love to know that too, because it is funny. Like you'll watch somebody take BP that might have gigantic power, and you're like, I don't know, guys, it could be 90. We don't have a scale for that, but it's incredible. And then there's some times where you watch, and again, we always laugh because nobody cares about how fast a catcher runs. But there's some times you watch a catcher run, and you're like, if that's not a 10, I don't know what is. But it's a great question. I mean, it is amazing how much the game has changed. Like for us, an average fastball, you have to average 92, 93 to just have an average fastball for us. So it's like, and it won't surprise me at all if all of a sudden in a couple of years with how the game is trending that it'll be 93, 94. So that's your 50. So, all of a sudden it's going to start being like your 80 heater is going to start being 100 to 102. It's I would love to know why it wasn't, starting at 1. It's a great question. I have no idea.
Have you ever, how many 20s? Okay. Which number is greater, the number of 20 ratings that you've given players or the number of 80 ratings that you've given players?
I would say I've given more 80s.
Okay.
Only because if there's enough 20s, you probably shouldn't turn
You're
that
not
guy
watching
in.
that guy.
You probably, yeah.
I'm all the 20s. My sunflower seed acumen was an 80, but I think most of my other baseball.
Well, certainly Jeff on the rowing machine at Orange Theory is a 20.
It's a 20.
Gotten a lot better.
Because he fell.
The base was a 20,
Tyler,
but the potential was No.
Tyler, I say that because Jeff is the only person I know that's actually fallen off the rowing machine at Orange Theory.
Sometimes
so
people work
clearly a 20.
Sometimes
I'm sure it was sweat combined with like a weird angle. Couldn't have been you.
It's exactly what it is. But I've always wondered about that because I know that was a huge thing with Ellie. As he was coming up, he had 370 grades on his scouting card. And so, like, in my mind, having slightly more understanding of scouting than a typical baseball fan, I was like, 370s, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be like an MVP candidate year 2 or something like that. And I think sometimes we can either overrate or underrate those numbers.
Yeah, no, and that makes total sense. And it's Ellie's a freak, obviously, in the greatest sense of it all. But like nobody likes to throw around 80s because 80's just such a scary number. But if Ellie's not an 80 runner, I don't know who is.
Yeah.
We went down to the org meetings and watched those guys take BP on the backfield, and Ellie went like 4 for 6 hitting it over the batter's eye in Goodyear. So if that's not 80 power, so you start laughing to yourself like it's a big, 8's a scary number, but you got to use the whole scale sometimes. And if it's not Ellie, I don't know who is.
Is it? Are you reluctant to hand out 80s just from I guess a professional standpoint, right? Like if you give a guy the highest grade and for whatever reason he doesn't pan out, do you take that personally? Do you worry about giving out that number?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's because when you start throwing around 80s, you're talking about guys that are all-star level of whatever. Now, the only one that you can throw around an 8 comfortably is fastball velo, because if he's sitting at 100 and that is your scale as 100 is an 80, you're fine. But when it's a position player, I mean, it's, you start talking about what's an 80 hitter and, something like that. I've never even come remotely close because you start thinking about, who is an 80 hitter, and you're talking about like Miguel Cabrera, and how many guys in college are going to be Miguel Cabrera. I have never seen one.
Right. And that's the other part of this is that, the excitement that we had with Ellie, but I think that adds in the disappointment factor for some folks that knew the scouting grades of Nick Senzel, because Nick Senzel came up to the major leagues with a hitting grade, I think at 55 or 60, and the potential was even higher than that. So there were a lot of folks who were like, okay, well, he is already on this level that is as good or better than some of the guys that are currently in the lineup. And then he just never really showed it. And so I think there were a lot of folks that looked at that number and almost wondered if the grade was wrong or something. But kind of going back to what you said when we were talking earlier, it might just have been that guys saw him on the right day and not the wrong day.
Oh, Nick, I played on the East Coast Pro team with Nick, which is, fun. Whenever I would see him, he's one of the nicest people ever. And Senzel was such a talented player. He's such a great human being. And you just feel bad because every time I felt like Nick started to get hot, there was some freak injury. And there's he played the game the right way. He played the game hard, and it's so hard to find and sustain that rhythm and be, you see Nick all of a sudden he'd catch fire for us, and he'd have like 4 or 5 home runs in a week, and you're like, it's there, and then all of a sudden he'd get banged up. So Nick was such a talented human being, but you start looking at the rest of that draft class, and I wasn't scouting at that point, but you start comparing him to everybody else that might have been in that draft, and you're like, well, every time we see Nick, he's hitting. And that's probably where that grade came from. But, there was never a question. That's all he did in high school was hit, hit, hit. So, sometimes it pans out. And, I do think Nick, one of those great questions of whose career is different if you can take away the injuries, I think Senzel's a whole different animal.
And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Reds. Thank you so much for checking out what we had to say about your Cincinnati Reds. We're here every day talking about the Reds for at least 30 minutes of baseball talk about the Reds in your feed. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite audio app. We're literally on all of them. And coming up on the next episode, there are rumors about that Paul Goldschmidt could be a Cincinnati Red. I don't know that I buy it, though. We'll tell you why on the next Locked On Reds podcast. Until then, Steve, what can folks expect from you and me?
We're going to keep listening to the rumors. We're going to keep following the off-season news. We're going to keep our eye on Japan now, and we're going to gather up all of that information, and we're going to bring it back here to keep you locked on Reds every single day.
I always have my eye on Japan because I love ramen, man. Ramen's good.
It's always about the food, isn't it?
Always.